And we're live on the air. So, I guess unless you guys have any other preamble, I guess we can get started with the show.
Sure.
Let's do this thing.
As Jared and them says, doing it live. And welcome to Bravo Team. I think this can be episode 25. Don't quote me on that if I'm wrong. I'm calling this one the movies. Today I'm here on Bravo Team, and I've got a couple of guests joining me. For my main show, we have Kevin Reitzel, a.k.a. Raider Nerd. Hey,
What's
Kevin.
up? Good
Glad
to be
you
here.
joined, buddy.
Good to be here, man.
And also joining us is Mr. Brad Abraham. Hey, Brad. How you doing?
AKA Zartan and the Twins hater. Don't forget that part.
AKA Zartan and the Twins hater. You kind of backed off of Serpentor a bit, so
I have come around on Serpentor. Serpentless. Yeah. Yeah.
Also from over on YouTube, we have Heinz Koch joining us. He says, gentlemen, good evening. Good evening, Heinz. Glad you could join us, buddy. And as I said, we're here to talk about some G.I. Joe. Originally, I was just going to talk about the movies, but I figured also I'd bring up the cartoons also briefly. We'll get some opinions on all that, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we would like to do if they give us reins for the G.I. Joe media universe, if you will. So, real quick, this is coming out a couple months after I record it, but Wednesday, the new G.I. Joe issue 301 came out from Skybound Entertainment. And also, I've got my guy ordering me one. There's also had a reprint of the first issue of G.I. Joe with, I guess, the editors or someone made some changes to Hawk's speech in that issue. And Skybound redid it with.
When is this going to be available?
It should be out now. 301 came out Wednesday, and I supposedly this reprint also came out Wednesday, but I didn't see it at my local shop. I asked my comic guy
The
to
reprint of number 1, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I gotta check that out.
And then the 301 is part of the continuation of the Real American Hero.
Cool.
And then I think it's next month Duke's gonna have his own series in the Skybound Transformers G.I. Joe mixed universe. So we'll see how that goes. But we're here to talk about some cartoons, movies. I'll briefly mention each one, then get you guys' thoughts on it. Heinz says I beat him to saying that. And talking about the G.I. Joe 301. And anyone in the chat, Heinz, if you have any thoughts on any things we mentioned, please feel free to pipe in. And also, as Heinz mentioned, there's also going to be a Cobra Commander series or mini series coming out also from part of the Skybound universe. So first up, as we all know and love, the first media appearance outside of comics for G.I. Joe was in G.I. Joe the cartoon. We know that because we talk about that every month here on G.I. Joe, Real American Headcast. That came out, first episode came out September the 12th of 1983. Won't spend much time on that because, again, we talk about that monthly. But overall, Kevin, thoughts on G.I. Joe, the original series?
One of my favorites. Love revisiting it when we talk about it on your Headcast. And it's nice kind of revisiting these because some of these we haven't seen for so long. It's nice to kind of go back and feel like we're watching them for the first time with a different lens, a different set of eyes now that we're older. And it's one of the highlights that I do when I'm on your show.
And Brad, do you have some brief thoughts on the original series of G.I. Joe?
Well, let me get this straight. You said it began airing September 12th, 1983. That can't be right because that was 40 years ago. And there's no way it can be 40 years ago. I refuse to accept it.
Wikipedia may be wrong. It may have been 2003.
You are so old.
That's more like
20 years ago.
That's more like it. No, I will say I do have very vivid memories of it being on. Not so much that I knew it was coming, but I only found out about it on the first day of it airing at school during recess. Some kids said, "Hey, there's a G.I. Joe animated miniseries starting this afternoon at 4:00 and you name the channel." And remember running home, turning the TV on. We didn't have a TV guide or anything handy, so turning on his waiting to see if this kid was actually lying to me, because kids lied a lot back then,
yeah.
as they do now. There was a kid in my school who had us convinced simultaneously that he was the nephew of a MLB player for the Toronto Blue Jays, which we believed because they had the same last name. And then he said he also had a snowmobile that he modified to make it look like the polar battle bear, and which seemed a little less plausible. And when he told us he actually also owned a mini sub that he used to use to travel through the sewers beneath our neighborhood, then we knew he was full of shit.
Yeah, I remember
It took three tries. He kept pushing.
I remember one girl in school back when I was younger tried to convince me she was on the Mickey Mouse Club.
Well, there's plausible. I mean, it is possible. California, it is possible, but
yeah, I'm like, I watched the Mickey Mouse Club, and that doesn't ring true. But okay, whatever you want to tell yourself.
Yeah, but it was great. It was having sort of discovered the toy the year before in 1982 and kind of getting away for it for a bit. I didn't really start getting into G.I. Joe in any serious way, the toy, at least until that spring and summer of 83. So I was kind of right into it. So when the cartoon aired, it was great because it was also sort of close to the same animation style and quality as the commercials that advertised the toys and the comics. So it was like interesting, like watching a cartoon that was also a commercial. So
yeah, I probably first saw it in the TV guide. I don't recall how I first heard about it, but I wasn't into the
didn't they have ads in comics, or like they were like also showing stuff for it on other cartoons as well? I felt like
probably
I felt like I knew it was coming. I saw it somewhere or knew somewhere that it was coming, because I jumped in like right away. That whole first 5-part series, I was on it.
Yeah, I'm sure they had advertisements for it on TV, because I wasn't reading comics at the time. I made the occasional I find it like yard sales, but I wasn't reading comics. I wasn't buying the toys. So I knew it was from somewhere. So I'm assuming they had advertisements on it, because again, I would watch cartoons. So I'm sure they advertised it beforehand. That's probably where I saw it at. But yeah, like you guys, fond memories. I have watched it probably, again, I ran through the whole series here a couple years ago when I was managing on swing shift. I had to get home at 1:00 in the morning, and at 2:00 they'd play 2 episodes of G.I. Joe on one of the channels. So I'd sit and watch those and live tweet my thoughts. But yeah, the original series, I loved it. It was one, like I said, it's the thing that got me into G.I. Joe that eventually led to this whole thing I'm doing. So
and then watching that first miniseries was like watching a G.I. Joe movie. You just had to wait a whole week to see the whole thing.
Yes, as we talked about earlier, the each of the opening series for each of the seasons was like a little movie. It was like full movie, but they split it up over the course of a week. So, but yeah, and then that went into the DIC series, as me and Kevin was talking about earlier. So they had G.I. Joe the movie, which we've talked about previously, and somewhere along the way, Sunbow lost rights to it and went over to DIC, and they had their first 5-episode series, Operation Dragonfire, which I saw, and then I never saw anything more. So I assumed G.I. Joe was canceled at that point.
Operation Dragonfire, that came out in 89. I don't even remember that. How did I miss that? Oh, that's right. I was starting to get interested in girls.
So you were getting interested in girls. I realized that was a lost cause.
That's why, yeah.
So I was into comics. As you was talking about, in 90, I moved out of my mom's house and moved to different towns with friends. So I probably missed it somewhere along the way there. But so I haven't watched the DIC series other than the first 5-episode series. I bought the rest of it on DVD at a later time, but by that time I was doing the show. I'm like, I'm going to cover this on the show at some point. I'll wait and watch it fresh. So, and from what I hear, that may be the best choice, because it may not want to watch it again, but we'll see as we get there. So Kevin, you weren't aware of the DIC series, correct?
Maybe at the time, but yeah, I didn't entertain it. I still haven't seen that one. The Dragonfly, Operation Dragonfly, I've never seen it.
Well, we'll be watching it at some point in the future. And Brad, were you aware of the?
Is there like a DVD? Is it out on DVD or something? Like just that 5-episode series?
I'm not sure if just that 5. I think it is, but I know they also have the DIC series also released on DVD.
Okay.
So, Yeah, like I said, I picked that up. I think it was Walmart. And Brad, the DIC series, did you watch that one also, or?
This is honestly the first time I've ever heard of it on this podcast right now. No, I heard about it, but I really only heard about it recently. Like when I started getting back into G.I. Joe fandom collecting, which was really in the mid 20-teens. I didn't even know there was a DIC show at all, because I like Kevin, I had discovered Girls by that point, but maybe a few years before. But I was just out of G.I. Joe by like late 85, early 86, as far as the toys went. I stuck around with the comic for a bit, but I had no real knowledge that it even continued it. I thought that just the cartoon had run its course and that was it. And it had sort of peaked as a popular property for kids, and it was just kind of in that sort of slow decline of just diminished returns year after year. So I was kind of out of it. It wasn't really on my radar at that point. So I literally did not find out that there was a DIC series until 2015 or 2016.
And yeah, it's the same way here. So we'll see how that goes when we get there. And then again, I was still reading the comic, but yeah, about the same time I stopped buying the toys because I'd moved out and didn't have the money. So I sold what I had, unfortunately. But yeah, I was reading the comic until the end, more or less. And then after that, there was the next thing I remember coming out was G.I. Joe Extreme, as far as cartoons, which had a toy line. And again, it was 90s. So everything in the 90s was extreme. I watched part of that and then stopped it. Kevin, did you watch G.I. Joe Extreme?
No. Is that when they started wearing neon outfits and stuff like that?
I believe it was after that. I said it was like the late 90s. And actually, I think I missed.
That's when I was in bands getting girls.
See, again, I wasn't, but that's why I started watching it.
Well, you know what's funny? In the mid 90s, though, I still was exercising my nerdy side because I was playing like Star Trek and Star Wars card games, and that eventually led to a job, you know?
Right.
But G.I. Joe at the time just wasn't on my radar. I was getting into other stuff, you know? So, I just didn't do G.I. Joe in the 90s pretty much.
And Brad?
You know, my first ever paid gig as a professional writer, a semi-professional writer, was as a writer on a TV pilot created by some of the people involved in Baywatch called Team Extreme. And unsurprisingly, it did not get picked up. Didn't even go to camera. But it was about a team of, as it would, an extreme team of extreme sports enthusiasts who also fought crimes. And that kind of tells me what G.I. Joe Extreme was probably like. Extreme content was very popular in the 90s. I have passing familiarity with it from, you know, just on lunch breaks. I worked at a mall as a part-time job during college, and they had a toy store there, and I'd occasionally browse through. It was a Toys R Us, actually, and just kind of see what was going on. And I'd say, I wonder if they're still making G.I. Joe toys. And I remember going in there and seeing all this G.I. Joe Extreme stuff in the racks. And I'm like, they're not making G.I. Joe toys anymore. That's really sad. And I walked away and I left, and I never saw it or heard of it or even thought of it yet until you brought it up now.
And that's what I do. Also, and then they had a couple, I guess, direct DVD. There's G.I. Joe versus G.I. Joe Spy Troopers and G.I. Joe Valor versus Venom. Came out in the early 2000s. I've got a copy of them, but I haven't sat down and watched them yet.
Same with me. I still have the damn Valor Venom and still haven't watched the damn things. Just has not gotten around to it yet. You know, if just say, Kevin, we're going to be doing a podcast on this. Can you watch it? I'm like, all right, fine.
That's probably what it'll come down to for I watch it. I'll probably, decide to do a podcast.
It would be kind of funny to watch them for the first time and give our thoughts on something we hadn't seen prior. So yeah,
that would be a good live stream opportunity.
Yeah.
As
there you go.
Everybody's sitting down and watching it for the first time and getting their actual unscripted reactions to whatever it is.
There you go. I'm gonna have to be on an upcoming Bravo team. Be prepared. So, Brad, have you seen either of those?
Nope.
Like CGI.
I've heard of them. I have heard of Valor and the Venom. I was so out of GI Joe by that point. I mean, it could have been there could have been a whole like live action TV series about GI Joe, and I probably would have missed it.
Yeah, somewhere at that time I had kids. By this time I was either divorced or getting divorced. This all flew under my radar. And then that's when GI Joe Sigma 6 came out in 2005, which is like an anime version of GI Joe. Again, I watched the first episode.
Maybe that's the one I still haven't watched yet.
That was a series that ran like 2 seasons.
Yeah, maybe that's what I can't remember. They're over there somewhere.
over there somewhere is such a collector thing to say. They're in boxes in the closet right now.
You walk in any like nerd toy store where it's owned by like one guy. It's like it's over there somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere over there. I can go look for it. But
I've been to that shop.
You have to hold up a 20 for the guy and say, I have money there. I want to go check.
Find the damn thing.
It reminds me of a comic shop called Wonderland. It used to be here. I guess it still is here in Fresno, California. That I went there back in the late 80s. And his front area was books all over, piles of things all over.
Yeah,
he had a back room almost floor to ceiling with comics.
Yes, I can't remember the name of it. There was a place in I want to say North Carolina, and it's like in this tiny shopping center is down the basement, and he had this big room, and everything was just piled up. But he had so much good shit, though.
Yes, yeah. So this guy,
you have to kind of work for it, to get what you want.
Yeah.
It's just like overwhelming. It's like, God, that's like a $400 toy, and you got dust all over it. It's just crazy. We've all been to those weird ones.
Oh yeah. So Sigma 6. Did we get to that one? Brad, did you talk about Sigma 6?
You mentioned Sigma 6. I am not familiar with Sigma 6 either. It was so off my radar. I mean, I'm surprised though that in hearing you recount all these things, how there was like a consistent effort over a good 10-year period of them trying to keep reintroducing GI Joe and keep the property going. I mean, I assume it's because
it's a good point, Brad.
I assume it's because Hasbro owns the property, that it's like, every 3 or 4 years or so, someone would say, well, what properties have we not done anything with or bit? And it was always GI Joe. And they're like, okay, well, someone go give us some proof of concept and see if we can introduce a new line and see how it does. I mean, I think that probably makes the most sense. They would keep trying these different things, but make them all different. It's like sort of throwing things at the wall and seeing which one kind of sticks there.
Yeah. And none of that really stuck. So
clearly.
Yeah. Like, what is that? I don't think I've heard of that.
Coming to a clearance aisle or a remainder bin near you.
Yeah, really. Then in 2010, there was G.I. Joe Renegades. I don't know if you guys heard that one. I actually watched that one. It took a little getting used to the art for me, but it wasn't bad. I enjoyed that one.
That's the one. I have that too, and I felt like I saw it.
Everything Brad's like me, or Kevin's like, maybe that's
still sitting over there.
It's sitting in a
GI Joe movies take preference.
I think is Renegades the one that was sort of like
the 18.
Okay, that one I did see when it came.
I feel like that's the one that a lot of hardcore fans defend, saying that's one cartoon you should see.
They're on Tubi right now, the free streaming service. It's available down here.
Right.
There's a lot of GI Joe content on that, and I think I have it bookmarked or saved to a list of something to watch at some point. I just haven't been motivated enough to watch it because you haven't emailed me to say, "Hey, we're talking Renegades. Why don't you, go watch some of them?" And then I'll say, "Okay, now I'll go do it."
Yeah, one day we will be talking about that to some point. And then this may be the one you're thinking about, Kevin. There's G.I. Joe Retaliation. No, sorry, wrong one. That was the movie.
That's Retaliation.
It's G.I. Joe. Did I miss it? There was one.
We're talking about all the weird stuff before we get to the good stuff, right?
Yes. Well, yes. And I can't find. There was a G.I. Joe. It was like on Cartoon Network or something like that. That aired was 10-minute shorts they put together as a movie. That was really good too. That's the one that everyone defends is the best G.I. Joe.
Is that Renegades?
No, Renegades was the regular series.
Resolute.
Resolute. Thank you.
Resolute. Thank you. Yeah.
I don't see it on
That's
this
it,
list. I'm
yeah.
looking at.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Resolute I am familiar with, and I'm familiar with it because totally by chance this is back when I lived in New York. I was just flipping through channels and hit Cartoon Network, and it was on, and I didn't know it was on because it was only a one-off. It was only like an hour-long show, and I'm watching it. At first I didn't quite realize what it was until I realized it was G.I. Joe, and I settled in and watched it, and by the end of it I was thinking, is this like an ongoing new series? Because this is really good. Like this is it felt like the best, or like the closest to an updating to the old Real American Hero cartoon that you'd want to see. It wasn't as kid friendly, it wasn't as kitschy or silly, it was pretty dark and grim in places, but it was really well animated. The voice acting was really solid. The story was really interesting too. So I had to look it up to find out. Say, okay, so it's just a one-off. I guess they're not doing it anymore, which was really, really disappointing because that's when I probably would have stuck with if they'd kept going with it.
Yeah. I said I missed it when it came out, but someone had mentioned probably on a news group I was into at the time, and so I downloaded a copy of it to watch. I'm like, okay, this is actually really good. I wish they would have done more of this. Kevin, are you familiar with that one, or is it singing in a box?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it, but it's over there
In the box. Into the box.
Okay, so let's go and move on to the movie since we've covered the animated series that they've had on and off over the years. So the very first G.I. Joe movie that when I first saw it, I didn't realize was a G.I. Joe movie. We'll talk about we'll start off with the best, then go down.
Should I start? You don't have a slideshow. Should I go pull out my Blu-ray?
Yeah, I didn't think to do a slideshow on this.
All right, hold on a second.
Yeah. But me and Kevin was talking before the show started, and I haven't seen this movie since it came out, and I didn't watch it with a G.I. Joe frame of mind, so I got to rewatch it now that Kevin's mentioned this to me. But the first one Kevin will be bringing up shortly is Megaforce. Brad, Megaforce, are you familiar with that? Well, Kevin's getting the movie. Are you familiar with that one?
I am very, very familiar with Megaforce. I remember the commercials and the trailers for it on TV. I never got to see it in the theater. But when it came out on video, it was one of the first movies that we rented when we actually got a VCR of our own. And it was, how do I put this without offending Kevin? Because I know he loves it. It's cheese. It is good 80s cheese that fortunately knows it's cheese. It embraces the ridiculousness of its concept and its execution.
Yes.
But it's fun. I think it's a fun curio for fans of 80s action cinema. It was directed by Hal Needham, who did the Cannonball Run movies, and was a noted.
Are we talking about Megaforce?
We are talking about Megaforce.
There we are, Kevin.
Hal Needham was a stuntman as well. He was actually, if you've seen the Quentin Tarantino film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the character that Brad Pitt plays is modeled apparently on Hal Needham, stuntman.
Also, knew about the original G.I. Joes from the 60s, and he had there's a rumor that he wanted to do a G.I. Joe movie.
But the rights, I guess, were just not available, which is really funny because Megaforce came out in 82, right?
Yes.
Kevin? Yeah. So,
yes.
And the G.I. Joe Real American Hero toy line began in the spring of 82. So they were kind of happening concurrently. So it could have been, for all we know, there could be a Hal Needham connection to Real American Hero. He could have asked, Hasbro could have said, no, they're not available. And then as soon as Hasbro turned him down, they said, quick, we should do something with G.I. Joe.
By the way, since I was sitting over there, Valor versus Venom. All right. Spy Troops.
There you go.
The movie. G.I. Joe Resolute. So I have all these damn things. And Renegades, which is the DVD series.
Yes.
They're more than just pretty boxes, Kevin. You can actually get a machine called a DVD player and put the disc.
What?
It comes inside the machine. You press play, and it'll show you a cartoon of G.I. Joe.
And real quick over in the chat, Heinz asked for starting Snake Eyes Origin. No, actually, we're gonna end with the worst. So we're gonna start the best, and we're gonna end at we're gonna dig through the bottom pile of crap and.
Well, funny enough, not to spoil anything for people who are tuning in, but if you're talking G.I. Joe movies, live action movies, you actually do go from the best to the worst.
Let's see,
Right
I'll
here.
look that.
Here's
Oh,
that
there we
master
go.
buzz. I got
There
that
you
one
go.
here. But here's one of my favorites, guys. This one right here, Pyramid of Darkness. And by the way, this is the one that you got in that action figure / DVD collection. There was like 4 of them or 3 of
Right.
them, and you got pieces that built the mass device.
Yes, I didn't see that. So I missed that.
But I don't have enough money to go around and buy all those, so I just found this by itself on eBay and bought it.
There you go. Yeah, that first one at Walmart for like $5, and I thought about picking it up, but I'm like, well, I've got it already. I don't know if and then went back, I didn't have it again. So, but I may.
Yes, Megaforce, definitely a G.I. Joe movie. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about.
Like I said, I didn't watch it at the theaters. I probably watched either rented it when it first came out, or probably on HBO or Cinemax, one of those. Probably on a late.
My mom gave me money to go to see some Disney release. Instead, I went to Megaforce instead. I remember there was this old guy sitting behind me, just really excited about it. Like towards the end, he kept going, Megaforce, Megaforce. Such a good
Very
time.
nice. But yeah, so as Kevin is fond of saying, that is the best non-GI Joe movie.
Yeah. It's so corny, but it's just fun. It's just, and they've just so you guys know too, we talked about it on a recent podcast because we did a Megaforce on Couch Potato Theater recently on the Phantom Podcast Network. Arrow in Australia released a brand new Blu-ray version of Megaforce, including new interviews with the stars. And I missed out on this one. There's a very limited like super collection that had like a hat and a patch and that stuff you'd see like a recruitment poster and all this kind of stuff. They sold out so quick. I never got my hands on it, but I did get the Blu-ray though. It's pretty cool.
Very nice. So yeah, well, again, we'll talk about that at some point in the future also, since it is G.I. Joe related or G.I. Joe adjacent. And then as far as movies, the first actual G.I. Joe live action movie we got, and this is where we're going to kind of differ opinion maybe, was G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra. Thank you. There's Rise of Cobra. I'll start on this one. It was okay. I don't like, again, as I've said on my Facebook page, I'm not a fan of when they change characters' race. I don't like the fact they changed Ripcord, had him played by one of the Wayans. I read somewhere online that they wanted to be more realistic, and yet they had those what was those turbo suits or whatever it was. And Cobra Commander, they didn't give him the hood; they gave him that plastic bubble thing around his head. I wanted to like it. I wanted to love it because it's G.I. Joe, and sadly, it's not the worst live action G.I. Joe we got, which we'll get to eventually, but it was okay for what it was, but it didn't scratch that G.I. Joe itch. Kevin?
I actually enjoy watching this from time to time. Yes, there's things that bug me. The thing with Cobra Commander bugged me, obviously, but I love that we got a Destro kind of backstory on it. Those accelerator suits, because this is supposed to take place in the near future, so there's future tech and stuff like that. But damn, did they get the Baroness right? Oh my God, is she freaking hot?
Yeah.
And Snake Eyes, of course, and also Storm Shadow. We got enough of it, we got enough G.I. Joey Cobra stuff going on to where it felt like it was. And I love the fact that we got a pit, out in the middle of nowhere. And we got Quaid, being was it Hawk, if I remember correctly? Yeah. And saying knowing is half the battle. I'm like, yes, and then what was it? Chris, what's his name? Was he Commander Falcon or something? What's his name from the Mummies?
Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, Brendan Fraser. Sorry, Brendan Fraser had a quick cameo in it too, but I didn't mind them, switching characters, race, or anything like that. That's fine. I just don't know why they went with Ripcord. That was weird to me,
Yeah, they're like, well, Ripcord, no one cares about Ripcord, and
yeah,
the comic, he had a great.
Did I mention the Baroness, by the way?
No, you did not. Did you like the Baroness in this? Did you think she was well cast?
Oh my God, yes.
So Kevin, you'd say when you're talking about the Baroness, hot?
hot. Yeah, they nailed her. So, yes, it's cheesy. It's not what we wanted as GI Joe fans right out of the bat. There's some, weird stuff with the Cobra, of course, Cobra Commander. But it's still enough for me to just sit back and enjoy as a popcorn film, and I still rewatch it from time to time.
I've seen it on occasion, but yeah, it's not one I'd rather sit down and watch. We'll get to that in just a minute, though. Brad, GI Joe: Rise of Cobra.
Well, there's a great line from a great American, a Texan, a Texas propane salesman named Hank Hill, who once said to a guitar wielding preacher, he says, "You're not making Christianity better; you're just making rock and roll worse." And that kind of is my attitude towards GI Joe: Rise of Cobra, at least on a story level. They weren't making GI Joe better. They were making their whole movie worse by their changes. You point out, race swapping Ripcord. Is that you didn't need to race swap Ripcord. You just had to instead of making Ripcord, make him Stalker.
Yes.
Or
why not? Exactly.
Or any of the other Joes who are of that background. I mean, that was the great thing about the property, particularly in the 80s. It was, in today's day and age when everything's they're talking about, you need more diverse cast, you need this. GI Joe had all that. I mean, if I'm just looking on the bottom of the artwork that Aaron has set up just behind us, I mean, you have Quick Kick there, you have looks like Footloose there, and you have other Joes there that are of different histories, and you already have all those characters there. I will say in their defense, and this is one thing that tends to slip through a lot of criticisms and critiques when you look back at movies from 2009, 2010, is there was a very lengthy Writers Guild strike that began in 2007 and into 2008, up until the most recent strike. I think it was the longest strike. And during that period of time, movies were either in production and they didn't have writers to come in and do rewrites. They just kind of had to wing it along the way. Or they had the script to a certain point and they're like, okay, well, we're gonna have to do another draft of this or whatever. Then they can't go to a new draft because they don't have a writer involved. And if it's a studio production that's signed on to honor the Writers Guild agreements, you can't hire a non-union or non-guild writer. You can have other choices to wait or go into production with what you have. And because Paramount had a slot available for GI Joe, and they'd already spent millions of dollars in development cost and pre-production cost, they had to go ahead. So when I look at Rise of Cobra in particular, it feels like one of those movies that was at least a couple drafts away from really nailing it, because I think there are elements there that work.
Yeah.
What works works really well. The Baroness works. I thought Scarlet works as well, and Snake Eyes too.
Scarlet was great too. Rachel Nichols, beautiful as well. I've seen her in other stuff too, and also Arnold Vosloo, who played Zartan. I liked him as well. And there's a connection to the director Stephen Sommers, who directed this GI Joe movie, because he directed the Mummy movie. Mm-hmm. And Arnold Vosloo is in this as well as Brendan Fraser, so there's that connection there.
Yeah, I was really disappointed in it because it was Stephen Sommers, because he had done The Mummy, which was great. Yes. To a less, he did. On the other hand, he did The Mummy Returns and Van Helsing, neither of which were great. Before The Mummy, though, he did a not as well-known movie called Deep Rising. With Treat Williams. It was monster movie set on a cruise ship. That movie was a fantastic under the radar, like cult hit, and it had, I think, if you go back and watch that movie, you can kind of see a tone there where it's a little light, it's a little silly, but it still manages to land most of the punches it throws between the interplay between the characters and the set pieces and everything that's going on in it. And in this one, it just kind of felt like they had all this money and they had all these set pieces and everything, but it just did not quite hold together the way it should have. It would have been interesting to see them, I think it was a modest hit. It wasn't a huge hit. It underperformed compared to what they wanted to, but you almost wish they'd taken a look at it and said, okay, we have the building blocks to continue this story. Let's use it. Let's keep the cast around. Let's keep, most of the characters intact and everything, and then continue this story. Because I got to tell you, when I walked out of the theater, after having seen it, I was kind of like, no, not really for me. But as I did, there were a couple of kids who'd come out and they thought it was the greatest thing they'd ever said, one kid's like, okay, you be Storm Shadow, I'll be Snake Eyes, and they're doing little karate moves on each other. And I'm like,
Nice.
okay, it worked for these kids, these 8, 9, 10-year-old kids. It worked for them, and
which is
I can
probably
kind of
the
accept
target
it.
audience for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just did not really it was not what I wanted. I've been waiting 20 years, 25 years at that point for a G.I. Joe live action movie, and that's kind of what I got instead. And it's kind of like the consolation prize. Like, well, okay, you didn't win the championship, but here's a ribbon, and
For the record, the budget on Rise of Cobra was 175 million, grossed just over 300 million. So
yeah, so not that that's the type of movie, I guess what they would call a forgot buster, kind of like the Lara Croft Tomb Raider movies. Like, they made money, but they didn't make enough money to justify a huge expenditure on any kind of sequel. But I guess it must have done enough business for them to say, okay, let's do another one. But, and this is the tragedy of it, or however you look at it. We're gonna do a sequel, but we're gonna not renew a lot of contracts. We're not gonna take out options on the actors who'd signed for 2 or 3 films. We're gonna slash the budget, and it's gonna be a smaller scale thing. Kind of what would have happened with Star Wars if the first Star Wars had not been a big hit. They would have done a smaller scale movie, which became Splinter of the Mind's Eye, the novel. But that's just sort of how it is. You kind of cover your losses and say, okay, well, if this thing made 175 or 200 million dollars, then if we cut the budget a substantial amount and we gross the same amount of money, then at least we'll make a little bit more profit on it, and maybe that's the way to go.
And I wonder how much also with studio decisions being, executives making decisions in there that kind of, as we tend to know, they tend to ruin things. So I wonder how much of what we got was, studio execs.
Also, too, what's his name that played Duke, Channing Tatum? He was under contract with was it Paramount or whoever released it, and he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to do this film, but he was kind of forced into it. And that's the way some of these contracts go. You sign, these contracts. It happened a lot more back in the days of your films. You'd be in debt to a movie studio for like 10 films or whatever it is, and he didn't want to do it, but he had to because of the contract he signed. And then he didn't want to come back for the second one, which is reason why they at least like, okay, well, look, at least we'll get you in there and we'll kill you out.
Yes, he's one.
Spoiler alert.
I didn't care. I don't care for him as an actor. I wouldn't have been sad if he wasn't there, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. But yeah, I don't know what you guys feeling on Channing Tatum, but Tatum Channing, whatever. But yeah, I don't think he's a great actor in my opinion. He's like a friend of mine when we were talking about him here, like he was talking about having him as Gambit in the X-Men movies.
He doesn't have to be a great actor, but he's got some charisma. I think he's a good-looking guy as well. Like I think actually what he's really good at is he's really funny, because I really liked him in the 21 Jump Street movies. He's freaking hilarious in those. And maybe that's helped because he's got Jonah Hill and some good writers and stuff. But honestly, I think those are his best films.
But yeah, so there was some good ideas in the movie. It's just, I didn't get what I wanted. But like Brad said, I mean, if kids came out of it enjoying it, that's one of the major things. That's been one of my complaints, that they haven't done a lot for the kids. So yeah, if the kids came out of enjoying it, that's my, what was I, 30 something, 35, 40, whatever it was when it came out. My older self opinion doesn't really matter if the kids enjoyed it, but and then we moved on from there. We went to G.I. Joe Retaliation. Kevin, thoughts on Retaliation? I know it's in a box somewhere you probably haven't seen yet. Oh.
So to me, G.I. Joe Retaliation is the G.I. Joe movie. This, in my opinion, is a good movie. I like this movie. I can rewatch this over and over again. It's got a lot, and also, not only does it have The Rock, but you got freaking Bruce Willis in this one too, playing like the original Joe. And I like the fact that they're down to like a smaller group. It kind of reminds me of like Special Mission, so to speak.
Right.
regarding physical media, by the way, I have this one on Blu-ray. I have this on Blu-ray 3D. But not only do I have one copy of a 3-way, I went and got another version with a lenticular version,
Oh, very nice.
and it had you could like free personalized dog tags. You can do that, and then I went and even got the steelbook version too.
Very nice.
And this is a fun movie to watch in 3D. Yeah, I like this movie. But I think the cast, as I mentioned before, the cast I think is great in this one. You got Dwayne Johnson as Roadblock. Channing Tatum comes in for a quick minute for Duke to die. But Adrian Palicki is Lady J. Awesome. And you also get Lee Bun-hyung back as Storm Shadow. And then you got Elodie Young as Jinx, the ninja, who we also see in, the Daredevils or Defenders as well. Ray Stevenson is Firefly. I mean, come on.
Yes.
Ray Park's back. You got one of my favorite actors, Walter Goggins, playing Warden Nigel James.
Walter.
Arnold Vosloo's back as Zartan. RZA, I think he's just there because he's a fan and he knows people. He's the blind master, you know. But I like the idea of it. And also, too, you got a really cool, realistic looking version of the Hiss tanks at the end with the battle, you know. And I just like the idea of seeing Cobra actually almost take over the United States, and Zartan taking over as the president, Jonathan Pryce is president, you know. And I just think it's a fun story. It's action packed. I love the chemistry between the guys, especially when they hook up with Bruce Willis, and they take on Cobra. I think it's great, and I love it. To me, this is the G.I. Joe movie. This is a good G.I. Joe movie. It's not perfect. It's got its flaws, but I don't get tired of watching this one. This is a fun movie. I got when I walked away from Retaliation, I'm going, okay, they fixed G.I. Joe. They did a good job here, you know.
Very nice. And Brad, thoughts on?
Well, I agree with Kevin. They did correct a lot of the problems with the first film. Like you mentioned the Hiss tanks. They brought in the Hiss tanks and they gave them sort of a modern twist upgrade to them. So they at least looked familiar. And, you know, you realize when you see stuff like that on a big screen in live action, you realize how much of what you want to see in a G.I. Joe movie is seeing the hardware the way it's supposed to look, not, oh, here's the new Starship Enterprise and it looks like a shoe or something like that. You're like, no, you want it to look right. You want it to look like the way it's supposed to look. I was disappointed that we just spent the last time talking about the cast and the actors that didn't work. I was kind of disappointed that a lot of the original ones didn't come back. I would have liked to have seen the Baroness and Scarlet and some of the other ones at least make a return appearance and not kill them off, but just actually have them be involved in the story somehow. And that is something that I think it was kind of missing, because it almost feels like a completely new movie, like a reboot, which can be a good thing. But if you're trying to establish some sort of continuity, as this one does, because, you know, there's the whole bit where they have to rescue Cobra Commander from prison and for some reason kill off Destro as well, because I guess the actor didn't want to, Christopher Eccleston didn't want to come back as Destro, or they just looked at budgets and said, you know, we can't afford to pay these people, so let's just, you know, strike them off.
I think most of the money went to the Rock's.
Probably.
Well, and therein gets that gets into one of my, I don't want to say dislikes, because I remember enjoying it, but when you put an actor of that stature, both physically and just personality wise, it becomes his movie,
right?
It becomes G.I. Joe Retaliation starring The Rock and a bunch of characters, and this will get into when we talk about what we'd like to see in a G.I. Joe a movie. You know, I feel like the guy's got such a force of personality that you can't, well, first of all, you can't really see him as anything other than who he is. So I didn't really see Roadblock, the character that I knew from the comic and the cartoon. I saw The Rock doing his thing and doing it well. And, you know, the other cast members and the other characters sort of stepped up. A big shout out to Ray Stevenson, who passed away earlier this year as Firefly, because I didn't know he was playing Firefly, but I knew the actor from the HBO series Rome and really liked him. And when it turned out, I was like, oh, he's playing Firefly. I'm like, okay, cool. That was one of my favorite one of my favorite villains. And they lost Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Cobra Commander, but the look for Cobra Commander in this one looked a lot closer to what you would expect him to look like in live action. So they did things throughout that kind of made you think, okay, this looks like G.I. Joe. This feels closer to G.I. Joe, what a live action one would do. And I think the best example of that is what I think the best sequence in any G.I. Joe movie that we've seen is the whole mountaintop battle as they've got Storm Shadow sedated and in a bag, and they're rappelling alongside a mountain as ninjas, but not just ninjas, red ninjas are in pursuit and swinging their swords and getting cut loose and falling down the mountain. Like when I saw that, I said, okay, that's worth the price of admission right there. Even if you're mixed on the movie like I am, it is worth queuing up just to watch that whole sequence. That whole sequence sort of screams, this is what you would see in the comic, and this is probably what you see in the cartoon as well.
I think I actually cheered when I was in the theater watching when that part was happening.
Yeah.
I was, yes. But yeah, from what you're talking, it sounded like you may not have been as into this one as Kevin was, and as I'm about ready to say, but that's why I put you in the middle. But I'm going to start with my bad about it. Like I say, I don't care. As I said, I don't care for Tatum as Duke. I don't think he does a good job. So I actually
he gets killed right away. Come on, dude.
That's so it goes from a bad to a good. I actually liked it and cheered when he died. I didn't mind him dying. As Brad said, I like The Rock, but everything you see The Rock in, it's The Rock playing a character. That was part of my problem with Black Adam. It wasn't Black Adam, it was The Rock acting like Black Adam. The Rock, yeah, he's not bad, don't get me wrong, he does a great job with what he does, but yeah, I don't see him as Roadblock. Another bad, Ray Stevenson. Well, I loved what he did. I don't like the fact that they kept taking his mask off, and I understand that the actors want to show their face, and I don't like that he took his mask off so much. But as far as what he did, I love Ray Stevenson. I think he's a great actor. I loved him in the Punisher Warzone. I loved him as Firefly. I thought he did a fantastic job.
You came on our podcast for that one, Punisher Warzone, right?
Yes. Yes. That was, in my opinion, the best Punisher movie they've done so far. But that's really my bad about it. As far as everything else, I love the ninja, the mountain fight. I love that they actually fixed Cobra Commander's helmet and actually gave him a recognizable Cobra Commander helmets. I do like that. Where you guys wanted this more of the original characters in there to make it feel more of the same movie. I kind of like that we have a different cast in it just to show how large the G.I. Joe group is, that we can focus on another set of characters. And there is that, they have Duke for briefly, thank God. They had Duke in there briefly to help kind of tie it together. And as you said, Cobra Commander and Destro started off captured, and they killed off Destro. Yeah, probably due to budget reasons, because of The Rock, I'm assuming. And also, as you said, they wanted to not spend as much on this one as they did on the first movie, since it wasn't as successful as they wanted. But yeah, no, like Kevin said, I love the more Cobra-looking vehicles in here. This is what I wanted to see. I heard a lot of people, for some reason, talking crap about this online over the years, and I will defend it with my dying breath. Like Kevin said, this is Megaforce withstanding. This is the best live action G.I. Joe we got. A few problems here and there, but overall, I thought it was fantastic. This is one I don't mind watching again. I have watched it a couple of times just because it's just a great movie in my opinion.
Question for Kevin. Amongst the array of copies of this movie you own, is any of them the extended cut?
Yes, I do have the extended cut as well. Yes.
Have you watched it?
Yeah.
I'm not being facetious either. Like, have you? And how different is it? Because I'm kind of curious.
It's not a big difference.
No.
I can't right now. I can't remember what they were. Just some extended action scenes. Not really any big plot extra reveals or anything like that.
No.
I think it's just more action basically and explosions and stuff.
That's not a bad thing though.
If you have a copy of the original, you're fine. But being who I am, I had to have a copy of the extended one too. So
of course.
What? You have a copy of the extended also? I find that hard to believe. Not Kevin.
Yes.
Kevin.
I think I had to get my copy from overseas though. I want to say they released it overseas. I want to say it's either a Canadian version or a UK version. I can't remember, but I have all region players, so I'm covered no matter where I get my stuff. So
I'm gonna have to look at getting one of those extended edition. But anyways, because again, not as bad as Kevin, but I don't mind having multiple copies, especially when it's
badass. Come on,
you know. That's the only reason I didn't buy the 3D ones because I don't have a 3D TV, but that looked really nice though. And that was the last G.I. Joe movie. We've been G.I. Joe deficient as far as movies go since then.
They never made another one after that.
There was no G.I. Joe. I'm sorry, G.I. Joe Origins. Snake Eyes movie that doesn't exist. Okay, I will defend Storm Shadow was fantastic in there. I love Storm Shadow. I hate with a passion what they did of Snake Eyes. Not only the race changes I've talked about, but just the character itself. Kevin, you're holding up Snake Eyes. Did you like it? Did you enjoy watching it?
No, it sucked. But I still have a copy of it.
So do I.
I'm watching it now in the background to remind myself why it's basically white noise. That's basically what it is.
Well,
let me point out the positives of this thing. There's a cameo by Larry Hama.
Yes.
I do like Samara Weaving, who played Scarlet. I thought she looked good. I was fine with the lady that played the Baroness. I thought she had kind of a cool new look. But by far, the best thing about this film is Andrew Koji. What's his name? Andrew, forgetting his name. Hold on. I gotta look this up real quick. I want to make sure I get this right here because there's a reason why. Andrew Koji, I was correct. Okay. So I was a fan of this guy, and if you have not seen it yet, make sure you check out the TV show Warrior. I believe it's on Amazon or HBO Max.
Sounds
It's
like
based,
but
it's based off a story that Bruce Lee had developed or wrote. It takes place during the late 1800s, early 1900s. In the Bay Area of California, where there's the large immigration of Asian immigrants, and the fight they have with labor issues with like the English and the Irish, and the battle among themselves in their own clan. There's the hierarchy where the ones that are the bosses, they dress really well. But what I really like about this series is Andrew Koji is really good at it, and he does some really great fight scenes, and the character that he plays kicks ass. And Andrew Koji, when you watch this film as Storm Shadow, you forget that he's supposed to be a bad guy. Snake Eyes is a dick in this film. If you watch it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He comes across, he's the one that betrays and backstabs to get what he wants, to find out the killer of his father, basically. And Andrew Koji comes off as the good guy, if you think about it, what he does. He's the one that has honor. Snake Eyes has got no freaking honor in this film whatsoever. And it's kind of sad because I'm actually a fan of Henry Golding. I'll be honest, I'm a huge fan of Crazy Rich Asians, and he's charismatic. Again, I don't mind what do you call it? The fact that he's Asian and he's not this blonde white guy, you know, blah blah blah. But the story was a mess. Andrew Koji is the only positive thing to come out of this. And what I don't understand about this is, first of all, why there is this material that's been around for years and years and years that you can draw inspiration from. I don't ever remember any story like this. This came out as someone's freaking ass, this story, to try to make this work, thinking, oh, let's do this. And let's say his father died because he rolled some dice and they were snake eyes. I'm like, come on. You have a really great story that Larry Hama wrote about a guy who got injured during the Vietnam War. Even if you don't place it during the Vietnam War, you could have done it during the Gulf War or what have you. I don't know where they came up with this idea of being the new origin of Snake Eyes. I think one of my friends in the Finest G.I. Joe Costume Club said it best. This is a decent / mediocre action film. It's not a G.I. Joe film. They just took G.I. Joe names and made something else, basically. That's all they did.
Yep. So we've got a restaurant, a Mexican restaurant we used to go to, owned by some friends. Yeah, we became friends with the owner and all that. And we always talking comics and stuff when I go in. And after I saw it, I went in there and he's like, "So, Aaron, did you see Snake Eyes?" "Yeah." "What'd you think of it?" It was a good martial art. It was a pretty decent martial arts movie. Horrible G.I. Joe movie. Horrible Snake Eyes movie. So, yeah, so I had the exact same comment. Yes, it was a decent, pretty good, martial arts action type movie. But yeah, as far as G.I. Joe Snake Eyes, no. Brad, is this one of your top 10?
My top 10 what?
I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Pieces of crap.
Yeah, pretty much.
Gosh, I could sit here for 5 minutes and just go, groan, moan.
Yeah.
Years ago, I remember it made the rounds on the internet on places like Ain't It Cool. Somebody got their hands on a Superman movie script written by J.J. Abrams, and it was one of those cases where you kind of go in and they say, we want a fresh new take on this character. And this Abrams script was like really, really messed with the mythology. It made Lex Luthor a Kryptonian. And it was conceived to be like, kicking off a whole new Superman story. And when you're dealing with characters that are iconic like Superman, like Batman, there are certain elements that I think you risk tipping the whole card over if you don't stick to it. So Superman is orphan from Krypton, raised by the Kents in Smallville, disguises himself as mild-mannered reporter Clark Kent of the Daily Planet, and his main nemesis is Lex Luthor. And that's kind of what you would call canon, or at least that's what the story is about. That's who he is. That's who everybody knows he is. And someone may be listening here and say, well, I don't know, would they put Snake Eyes on a par or like a level with Superman? And I'm like, well, I kind of would, because when you look at it just in the scope of time, Superman was, created in 1938, correct? Which is only about 44 years before G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, arrived. And we're about the same distance from G.I. Joe issue #1 and the toy line as Superman's creation was from the creation of that toy line and that comic book. Right. So I think if you look at it that way, you have 40 plus years of Snake Eyes stories, and Snake Eyes is a popular, enduring character for an entire generation of let's be honest, boys, boys becoming men. And I think you run a risk of, again, it's the whole Hank Hill thing, it's like you're alienating both audiences by saying, well, we're going to do a Snake Eyes movie. Great. Only it's not going to be the Snake Eyes that you know and love. It's going to be a completely different story. You didn't even need the G.I. Joe connection in it at all. You'd still have the story. And I think that this is one of those things that Hollywood is really bad about, particularly when they're adapting another property. And some of it is just by design, and some of it's by encouragement, and some of it's by preservation. When you're a writer brought into a property or a project that is pre-existing, you want to kind of put your own stamp on it as a writer. Part of it is an ego thing, but part of it's also to kind of protect your credit, because you assume that when you're brought into these things, you're not going to be the only writer. So you want to put in as much stuff in there that may survive subsequent drafts. So when the time comes to settle on credit and things like that and royalties, you want someone to say, okay, well, we looked at everything over and here's the credit breakdown. So because somebody early in the process said, hey, how about magic stones and giant snakes? And that somehow made its way through every subsequent draft of this movie. And so somebody got accredited, and they maybe get a royalty check and a piece of the shot of the very weak toy sales on this thing. And it's kind of like a way to kind of, carve out your little piece of the pie. But I think this is just one of those things where they have the property and they have the characters, but they don't really know what to do with them because they don't really understand them. And they can go on to any number of press junkets and interviews and put in the press kit, oh, I read the comic when I was a kid, or I was a big fan of the show or the toy line when I was a kid, so it's a dream come true to tell the Snake Eyes story, to tell the Snake Eyes origin. And I think the fact that they call it Origin Snake Eyes, like they're trying to carve out a definitive origin for the character, where, you know, there was no real origin for him in the comic, sorry, not in the comic, in the cartoon, but in the comic there was a pretty nifty, pretty interesting origin story to him. And as Kevin rightly pointed out, you know, you could have done that story essentially and updated it for the present day and have him be a Gulf War vet as opposed to a Vietnam vet. But even just on a fundamental level, I think the movie fails in so many ways. Like, again, when I said before, it feels like there were several drafts away from really nailing it. And I remember watching it, and sometimes when I'm watching a movie and it's not working for me, I'll just start making up what I think is a better movie in my head, because I'm like, oh, you know, maybe if they'd done this, maybe if they'd done that, it might have worked out. And they had the elements there. I think they had a great idea of having his dad get killed, not because he rolled a Snake Eyes or anything, get killed because he screwed over some guys who happen to be affiliated with this mysterious terrorist organization called Cobra. And then you have him as Harry Golding as an adult, you know, in this underworld, you know, working his way through, fighting his way through, and finding these little Cobra signals, like the one that Kevin's wearing right now. And he's sort of like trying to find out who the people were who killed his dad. And that kind of ties in, brings him into contact with the Arashikage clan. That brings G.I. Joe into it. It felt like there was a through line that was there, possibly. And then someone just took a big eraser or a dry eraser. It's like, no, we don't need that. Just have it be this, have it be that, have it be that. And it could have been there at some point, but you know, when the executives come in with their suggestions and their notes, it's like you either find a way to make it work or they'll find somebody who will. And you know, it felt like they had on paper, they could have done something with it that might have worked, that could have satisfied old school fans. I may say, okay, it's not the exact story or not the exact origin, but I can live with the changes they made because they were true to the spirit of the story that it's about.
You have sorry to interrupt you, Brad, but you make a good point. I just wanted to elaborate on something there that you said, because you had, you know, I like that you had the clan, you had the building and all that kind of stuff. You had all these pieces that I think visually could have worked, with the exception of that stupid stone. But you had all this stuff that you could have used. You had the sets already, you know, and I'm looking at the budget. The budget was like $88 million and only made like half of that, you know. And I'm sure the reason why it only made half that, because all of us G.I. Joe hardcore nerds went and saw it opening weekend and then told everyone else, don't go see this thing. Yeah. But you're right. It had all these pieces. If you just got the story right, it would have worked. Right. You know, because Henry Golding is a good actor. I've seen other stuff that he's in. All of these actors that they got are great actors. The story just sucked.
I think the story let them down, and it let them down not just on a world building G.I. Joe Snake Eyes level, but just on I think a basic story level. I think we had done a podcast a year or two ago, Aaron, where we're supposed to be talking about G.I. Joe, the movie, the animated movie. And we ended up just tearing a new one into the Snake Eyes movie because we'd all seen it by that point. We're disappointed. But one thing that came up was that, you know, when you have Snake Eyes and he's trained to be a ninja and there are 3 tasks or 3 tests he must pass to become a full-blooded ninja, like for the character to grow, those tasks should be about him overcoming some obstacle that he's carrying with him. You know, if he's carrying his thirst for vengeance and revenge, he's bringing his arrogance in and everything else. And it's like, you know, to become a member of the clan, you have to let all those things go and you have to defeat those things. And the whole idea is he should be going through these trials to kind of become a better version of himself and kind of tear away the ego and all the other stuff that's holding him back and embrace the way of the clan and the way of the ninja. And instead they just said, oh, here's, you know, just some lame little, you know, test you got to go through, and you got to fight a big snake. And it's like, well, you know, like, why? And was this a deliberate choice, or was it somebody on the executive level say, have him fight a big snake because Cobra is a big snake? You know, and that's the tone of a lot of the notes you get in situations like this. And I know this because I worked on a TV pilot called Team Extreme, which was terrible.
But yeah, it doesn't seem like Snake Eyes learned anything throughout the movie. Near the end of the movie, he was still the same dick he was at the beginning. And yeah, like I say, yeah, to me, Snake Eyes, even before he became Snake Eyes, back in issues 26, 27, you know, he came across as very honorable, very loyal. I mean, that's why he got his face burned, because he was, you know, trying to save Scarlet. that's why, you know, he became, went to the Ninja Clan, and they, even though he wasn't one of them, they accepted him as family because he was very honorable, and he was one of them. In fact, so much that's why they believed that Storm Shadow killed the Hard Master. So but yeah, that's yeah. I don't have words for that, but but yeah, like I say, so yeah, the last one they did was Retaliation. I don't like to admit this one exists, but just because, yeah, and like I say, Storm Shadow, as Kevin said, was magnificent. I love, excuse me, the guy playing Storm Shadow did a fantastic job. And real
Andrew
quick,
Koji, yeah.
thank you, Andrew Koji. And just follow up on that, yeah, Warrior is on Max.
Max, okay. Excellent show. Highly recommend it.
I need to watch that one.
Yeah.
And I guess the executive producer is Bruce Lee's daughter, Shannon.
Yep.
So I just want to add to my list to watch. But yeah, so that's the G.I. Joe movies. Unless you guys have any other comments on anything you guys want to, I mean, again, if you guys want to keep bragging on Snake Eyes Origins, I'm more than happy to continue on. But otherwise, we can move on to greener pastures, as it were. So let's say tomorrow you get a knock on your door. We'll start with Kevin. You get a knock on your door, and it's Hasbro saying, here's the reins to G.I. Joe. We're not talking about the comic because right now it's being handled by, as I talked about earlier, Skybound. So we'll see what happens with that. But if they were to give you everything else besides the comics, Kevin, do something with this.
Well, I liked what I would give an origin background, first of all, to Cobra, because you need a threat to kind of build a team against it, I think.
Would you bring Cobra Law?
No. But I like I like the idea. Make him a car salesman, like in the thing, it'd be kind of cool. But I really like what even though the movie wasn't great, I like Rise of Cobra, what they did with Destro, and you get allies together, and maybe they do some like crime together, or like low level crime, and then they make some connections, start getting bigger. And I like the idea that G.I. Joe comes together because you're getting the best of the best from different avenues of military or even non-military, basically, that could kind of come together to fight and get together. And I think that you need to kind of target, you need to get like, I would get Hawk, maybe have him kind of start. And he puts together a team, and he picks some people. And I would love for them to pick some of the original team members. I would love to see a live action version of Stalker. I would love to see that. And I think Snake Eyes should come in as Snake Eyes, but I think that we should get a background version of why he's masked up, and why he doesn't talk. And I would love to see them revisit the friendship, and then maybe, at least something there with Scarlet, but we need someone that's been in war together. That's the important part. And they tried to do that with Rise of Cobra. You had guys that were in conflict together, but you need to build that brothership, that brotherhood first. And, ideally, I would love for them to do the whole Vietnam early 80s thing, like we ran through with the comic book. But I think it's more realistic that you should update it. And that's why I say go back to the Gulf War or something like that.
Good thing about America is we've always got a war you can always turn to.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. But I would like to, in addition to like, Stalker and either Hawk or, Snake Eyes, I would love to see, I need to see some Joes with animals. Let's bring in some Joes with animals, man. Come on. How cool would it be if like, and I don't mind if you change this, but like, have, Snake Eyes out there, with his wolf, and maybe he's friends with Spirit. Who knows? Because Spirit's that kind of outdoorsy guy too, and maybe that type of thing. But we don't have to know about his martial arts skills. He doesn't even have to showcase his martial arts skills, because you remember originally he was a commando. Maybe he's a commando. let's do that. Let's play up the martial arts thing later. He has those skills, but let's say he's a demolitions expert. He's a guy that he's a spook. That type of thing. And just kind of go on from there. But just pull like some of the really cool stories from the comics. Use that as material. You got it all laid out. There's some good stuff in there. I mean, think about like the last plane to Rio Lindo, having that be a mission, that type of thing. Use that stuff. That stuff. I don't care if you make a fake South American country. There's a guy that's trying to take over. I mean, they did that in Commando. They had a fake South American country, which I think has been used in like other movies as well. You have all of this material, but just stay true to the characters. Stay true to the original vibe of that comic series. Even the cartoons, as hokey as it was from time to time, it still stayed true to that whole thing. And having Cobra be an actual international worldwide threat would be nice as well, because you have so many great Cobra villains. And for the love of God, yes, I do want Dreadnoks. Bring in the Dreadnoks. Come on.
Amen.
And by the way, I just want to say, the Crimson Twins, I think it would be really cool if they actually were business. You saw the business suits,
Right?
And they worked closely with Cobra Commander to either hide their resources or to work on the resources, because they would be ideal characters to introduce into a film to be allies with Cobra, because they would know how to finance their terrorist activities in a realistic way. Hide the money, launder the money, be the guys behind the money, because that's what you do. You attack the money to try to stop people from doing bad things, right? I think if they played those characters right, they don't have to give them their traditional outfits unless they have some type of battle outfit or something. You want to kind of pay homage to it, but I think that would be really, really cool.
Very, very much so. Anything else, Kevin, at this point, or?
No, I think I've taken up all of Brad's ideas. He's just trying to figure out something new to say right now.
I am frantically going, oh no, he's just stolen all my ideas again.
But I'm really curious, because Brad's a writer here, so I'm sure he's actually got some more realistic and better ideas.
Well, see, Larry's already done all the heavy lifting, so I mean, I'm sure a lot of thoughts on it, because Larry's already done the heavy lifting for 40 years of this.
Yeah. So. I feel like I could just say whatever what Kevin just said. I echo. Well, you know what? I would say I think there's some things that a good G.I. Joe movie, if someone is trying to make a G.I. Joe movie, I think there's maybe like 5 key things that they should do in order to make it work. And it frees you up to kind of go in any number of different directions. But I think the fundamentals have to be, the first is to remember that it's G.I. Joe. It's not Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. It's not Snake Eyes and Ninja Force. It's the team, not so much the individuals. And while the individuals in this do matter, how they're utilized matters a lot more. I mean, Star Trek is kind of central to Captain Kirk and Spock and McCoy, but you need all of them, and you need Scotty and Uhuru and Sulu and Chekhov as well. But I'd say make sure it's a team. And I would almost want to, fan casting or just dream casting, and say, make the Joes in this movie the original team. Make it guys like Grunt and Stalker and Flash, and kind of go in that direction, rather than saying, okay, we'll pull some characters from here, we'll pull some characters from here, in regards to the G.I. Joe team. Now, the second thing I think they would really have to do is to echo what Kevin said, have Cobra be a genuine threat. I mean, don't have them be bumbling terrorists. Don't have them be generic terrorists. These guys are like Hydra. Have them bigger and much more much more powerful than our heroes. Have them be this shadowy terrorist organization that has a global reach, and have them more fully formed compared to the G.I. Joe team. I would almost start a G.I. Joe movie with no G.I. Joe at all, and have the formation of the team be sort of a response to all of this stuff that's going on. And you'd have Cobra pulling off some major events, terrorist events, or however you want to do it, and have the U.S. and whoever else is involved say, well, we need to form a special team to counter these guys, off the books and everything like that. And kind of have that be the catalyst to go about kind of like you would in like a Mission Impossible or even a James Bond, going around recruiting the different agents and stuff like that. You'd have General Abernathy tasked to do this, and he starts, reaching out to say, okay, I served with this guy Stalker, and Stalker's like, okay, I know some people we should talk to, and it's saying, this has to be off the books. The president's going to disavow us if this goes sour and everything like that. So, they have to go out and recruit, find people that they've worked with before who are all kind of a little wild cardish, to kind of set them apart as being a little more rebels and thinking outside the box and everything, and which could create some really interesting character dynamics. Because it's also G.I. Joe is very much about the characters, and having that team come together. But with Cobra specifically, don't make Cobra Commander a bumbling idiot. I mean, we love Chris Latta, his portrayal of Cobra Commander on the cartoon with the the campiness, but he should be more of like a frightening Dr. Doom, Thanos, Magneto type, almost make him like a Hans Gruber sort of, this very formidable, very smart guy, very patient. And always have him be kind of one step ahead of the good guys. And I'd say controversially, you could even have Cobra ultimately win. Maybe they lose the battle, but the organization is still in place, and the war is going to continue, and now it's going to expand, which means the G.I. Joe roster is going to have to expand in a subsequent film. And while I am always loath to say, okay, well, this is part of a 3-part movie, I like my stories to have a definitive beginning, middle, and an end. But with something like this, you kind of have to think a little broader and say, okay, well, this is going to be, a much larger story. You really have to nail the first story and get people to want to actually watch the second one. You think of Star Wars, and on a fundamental level, the first Star Wars movie is kind of small in a way. It's a small story of starting, with the droids and then Luke, and then they meet Obi-Wan, then they go to Mos Eisley and they meet Han and Chewie, and then it kind of expands from there. But when you look at it as a very fundamental basic level compared to the other Star Wars movies, the scope is a lot smaller. It's probably the smallest Star Wars has ever been over the last 45 years or so, because it's just the story is very contained who you're following through. I would also say, you got to have Springfield and you got to have the Pit in there. I'm sorry, I know people like to change it and say, well, no, okay, well, they had the Pit in Rise of Cobra in a desert. Like, no, it's got to be like some decommissioned fort in the U.S., possibly Fort Wadsworth.
I got to say something real quick though. I don't like the idea of it being on Staten Island, because trying to get over the Verrazano Bridge is a pain in the ass.
Oh, it is.
It's got to be somewhere in the States, but not in Staten Island.
Yeah. No, it should just be some decommit. It doesn't have to be. I don't even think it would need to be Staten Island. It'd be kind of nice to have a throwback, or be a Fort Wadsworth.
Could be some old nuclear silo
somewhere. Yeah, just some out of the way place.
Later on in Utah.
Yeah, or something like that would be kind of cool too. Like some Cold War, atomic age, underground facility that they've taken over. It's sort of if you go with the idea that they're sort of off the books, top secret organization, they're gonna be, out of the way where you're not gonna know where they are. So they probably would be, I think, in a place like Utah or Arizona or even somewhere in California, guys, just because, you know the geography more than I do. But the thing is, the Pit and with Springfield is for G.I. Joe, like these are iconic locations. This is Xavier's school for the gifted. This is Wayne Manor, and this is the Batcave. This is the Fortress of Solitude in Avengers Mansion. Have them and use them. And I think in particular, bringing something like Springfield into it would be a great central location and a set piece, because in this case, you have a whole town that has been taken over by this organization. And, I'd love to see them get into the mechanics of how Cobra is organized, what makes them work, and to make them plausible and really get into the nuts and bolts of, how do they recruit these people? Who do they target? Especially in the social media age, you can totally see Cobra Commander being like a heavily invested social media guy, like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or something like that, just where it's like they have access to all this algorithmic data. They have, they have GPS or geotagging of all the people who are circulating all those memes online and everything like that, and going, these are the people we need to target. Say, hey, we got a great employment opportunity here in Springfield.
You know what was a good idea that I liked? There was a Clive Owen movie called The International, where it was all of these banks that work together to keep their money, make their money, and if people threaten them, they would basically have people assassinated. And they
Mm.
were so powerful. And I would like the idea that there's a financial reason why they're so successful at doing what they're doing, which is why I brought in the twins, because they could be
Yeah.
that part of it, But yeah,
There's actually, I just finished reading it. There's a YA young adult book series I was reading called G.I. Joe Classified. I don't know if you've heard of it or even
no,
aware of it. It's like a YA, it's like a young adult book series. They've put out 2 books. There's a 3rd one on the way,
no.
and it's kind of sort of like a revamp recasting. And it's the main characters are Scarlet and Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow as like high school students, which sounds terrible on the surface. And when I first decided to read it, I'm like, oh, this is probably going to be terrible. But they actually did a pretty good job of sort of resetting the story. And it's set in Springfield. And they're the children of people who've been hired from their various tech jobs to go work for DeCobre Industries. And their high school is state of the art. They all get to wear these fun little gadgets that are like VR headsets and stuff like that. But it turns out that the town is run by Cobra, and nice. Zartan is there, and there's a 5th column involving Duke and Roadblock and the Arashikage clan as well. And it's very much aimed at that young adult, get them interested in G.I. Joe stories. But if you're a fan of G.I. Joe, you might find it amusing just to kind of go through and say, okay, I kind of see what they did here. But the point I'm making, though, is the whole way that the writer set up Springfield seems very plausible if you were to take like a Apple or a Facebook or something like that, where those big campuses, only it's like a whole town and everybody's connected to Facebook and everybody's got these little headsets that they wear, so they're constantly connected to the web, but they're also constantly under surveillance as well. And something like that to kind of see what the kind of update the story in a way that it makes it a little more plausible for how these guys could actually become as powerful as they are. And the only other things I'd add is say you need a good POV character to kind of take you through the story. And we've seen Duke and we've seen Roadblock and we've seen Snake Eyes. I think it's time for Scarlet to get her due.
Yeah,
because she is counterintelligence after all, and I think she would be a really interesting POV character to follow through on the Joe's side. On the Cobra side, though, I think Destro could also fill that role quite well as well, because he's kind of the outsider. He's the arms dealer. He's the one with the entanglements with maybe both the U.S. military and with these guys in Cobra who reach out to him through his old girlfriend, the Baroness, and that could be an interesting person and way to follow. And regarding the big snake in the room, Snake Eyes, last point is have Snake Eyes in it and actually do the origin in the movie, but have him be just a soldier, be one of the team, be Stalker's colleague from the Gulf War, have him, meet Scarlet, meet cute with Scarlet, them starting to form a relationship, have him badly injured and disfigured during the course of their mission, and have him get the bandages, wrap him around his face and everything like that, continue with the mission, and towards the end of it, everything's all over and everything, and somebody looks over and sees the tattoo, the Arashikage tattoo on his arm, which is not commented on at all because you
get me all excited here, Brad.
Yeah, bring the you bring guys like Zartan and the ninjas and the more Atlantis stuff into like in the next film, right. But you kind of plant those seeds in the first film. But I think the big thing would just be to just remember the story you're telling and try not to tell everything and cram everything into one movie. Figure out the story you want to tell and tell it in a way that you can kind of springboard it into a second film that's going to make even more money than the first one.
Yeah, have your complete story, but have it so you can spring off of it from other stuff.
Yeah.
And see, I went a little bit further than you guys, I think. So I would take it from a 2-tier front. I would do a cartoon, 30-minute cartoon, a mixture of the original cartoon, but with the Resolute, not quite the adult storytelling of Resolute, but because you want the kids to get into it, but a little more serious than the original cartoon was. I would have that, definitely have a cartoon for the kids and us. And then also do like we talked about, do a movie, kind of what you guys both have said, start off with Hawk forming the team. Maybe not, I don't know about all the original 13, but a lot of the 13 Joes being, Stalker, Doc, Scarlet, Snake Eyes, a couple of others from the original team, Zap, Breaker, however many you want to have on the team. And yeah, do the origins of Cobra. Have, as Kevin said, like Larry's done it already. Have Larry, have Cobra Commander be a used car salesman fed up with, the government. You've always, again, that's always very timely. No matter who the president is, you've always got one side that's fed up with, the other side that thinks, they're holding them down or whatever. So, it's a guy that, inflation's bad right now. Things are coming down. So he starts his, pyramid scheme and show the rise of Cobra from there. Yeah, like Kevin said, I would include the twins briefly as business, as helping Cobra Commander. Because again, that's one thing they don't really touch on a lot is, where they get the money from, do all this. Show, the twins helping, like Kevin said, the money laundering, the whole, everything that the twins can get into and build up from there. And then, have a complete movie, but leave. Again, I want to see Zartan the Dreadnoks, but I agree with Brad. Bring them in later on, maybe in a second movie. But if the first movie does well, launch a TV series on Max or wherever, G.I. Joe Classified, looking at more, or G.I. Joe Special Missions, looking at, and you can bring in more team members and do smaller, 1 or 2 episode. It doesn't have to be, and that's part of the problem with a lot of superhero shows. I'll go, right now is they feel they have to have one villain for the entire season. And so you get a lot of filler episodes in there that go, have this be, either a standalone episode or, 2 episodes at a time, that tie together, and just have, we can, and show Snake Eyes origin in there. Do, that way you can have a rotating cast. You don't have to have, which I don't know how feasible that is. Cause a lot of people, if they sign on for a series, they want to sign on as a regular. So, and then, Kevin,
I just gotta say that might be the best vessel for rebooting G.I. Joe as a TV series, because as you just touched on, you don't have to have the same team every episode. You have maybe a core, but you can bring in someone else and go, oh man, there's Tripwire or whatever, have fun like that. And it allows you to, do some episodic storytelling. Cobra would always be the big bad, but how cool would it be to have an episode where, like, tell me you would love to see the Dreadnoks going on and trying to steal and wreck some airplanes. I mean, come on,
definitely.
How cool would that be? And just little things like that allows you to do that. And, even if you got only half-hour episodes, it would be great. But I think that might be the best vessel for, doing a show without having to have this gigantic budget of a movie, right, and doing it that way,
It's an hour-long show, and each episode, or every couple episodes, focus on a new group of people, or have your main character, have General Hawk show every once in a while just to tie it in with everything else, and just show.
If you called it G.I. Joe Special Missions, you got your vessel right there.
Yeah, nuts.
Yeah. I was just gonna say I'd like to see them go try another animated show, but actually do it. So we're doing 13 or 14 or however many episodes, that sort of individual standalone stories that gradually tell a longer.
Until they get live action right, they need to keep trying live action. I think they've succeeded at cartoons. That's why I don't want to see a cartoon. I want them to keep doing live action until it's done right. Just my opinion.
Yeah, I want to see both, because again, I think the younger kids would get more into the animated. I would think. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's an old fuddy-duddy.
Or, a lot of times they'll do an animated show that's spun off of a movie. So if you do a movie and you actually get it right, then you can do a show called G.I. Joe Special Missions, have it be animated, and they'd have it employ the same character designs and the same production design of the movie. And it's like you're telling other stories in the separate universe, keeping the people interested in the story while you're putting the next movie together. And then you can have characters who you introduce in an animated show show up in a live action version, in the live action variation, so you can actually watch the movies and not watch the cartoons and still have a story. But if you watch the cartoons that are set in between, that you can go, oh, okay, then I have a context for this. I have a context
Yeah, gives you a little more
for these
filler
people. Yeah, yeah.
without
Which is the way they seem to be going with a lot of things these days. I know with a lot of the Marvel series, probably to their detriment in some cases. They've been, releasing movies, but now they've been kind of saying, well, you don't need to watch this episode, or you don't need to watch this Scarlet Witch series or this Secret Invasion series to understand what they're talking about. But it wouldn't hurt if you
right.
put down for that Disney Plus subscription and gave over several hours of your life to filling in the blanks, for answering questions you didn't really have.
Yeah, no, and I do agree. If you are going to do that, it's best to have it so you can watch the movie by themselves or the show by themselves. But there's also that interconnectivity. If you do watch everything, oh, okay, I see that. And for the hardcore fans like myself that would watch the movies and the shows, there is that interconnectivity. But for someone that just wants, I don't care about TV shows. I want the movies. You can watch each movie, and each movie can stand alone on its own without having to see. And that's why I watch them all, so I don't know how accurate it is, but that's a complaint people have about the Marvel stuff is that you got to see the last 20 years of movies and TV shows to make it make sense. I watch it just because I am addicted, but so I don't know. So that plus I pulled some of the stuff I know from the comics. I infer. So that's why sometimes I'm watching like a movie or something. I'll ask my wife, "Well, did you catch this, or is it just me bringing outside knowledge into it and assuming that's what's going on?" So, yeah, most definitely. Do you have a thought, Kevin?
I would warm up to the animated series if it was done right.
Right.
I would like to see, inspired from the comics or special missions or what have you. I just don't want it to be corny. I'd like it to be a little more on the edgier side, personally. Not too edgy to where it's kids can't watch it, but something that would be kind of fun and done with a really cool animation. I think
you get the right writers, they can make it so kids and adults both can enjoy it.
Yeah. So, I'm really sold on your idea of it being a live action TV series. I think that would be a good way to really dive into a longer story arc, but still have some episodic stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then right, they can have episodic stories, but then you have this longer, B storyline that's going on that if you're watching the entire series, it pays off somewhere along the way. But if you're just watching individual episodes, you're not left wondering what's going on.
Right. Yeah.
But so yeah, Kevin, any other thoughts on G.I. Joe, what you want to do or anything else we've talked about?
I just hope in my lifetime before I die, they get G.I. Joe live action right. The only thing they've really gotten right for me is the Retaliation movie. Although I can watch Rise of Cobra, I want some live action that'll live on after I die that people can go, oh, that was good. That was good. Those other ones, not so much, and I don't know if it's the people at Hasbro that have kind of lost. I mean, you look at the people at Hasbro right now and you see that the classified, 7-inch, whatever figures, they're doing well. They're selling well. It's mostly us that are buying it,
Right.
But we're the ones with disposable income. And we are your target audience. Yes, you can make it PG-13 for kids, but we're going to be the ones that are going to be the loudest. We're going to be the ones first on the social media telling you whether or not it was good or not.
Yep.
We are the people that you need to listen to. And I'm tired of think tank people thinking that they know what the fans want. Hello, Star Wars. Talk to people that know what they're talking about. Get their input, borrow from this wonderful pool of material that's already laid out there and pull out some good pieces from that. Don't just pick names out and make a completely different movie. There's just so much to go with there. And I'm just pleading with Hasbro, whoever, the Bonaventura, whoever, listen to the fans, listen to the people that have been there, that have the money to spend, and that will ruin your movie after opening weekend if it sucks, like we did with Snake Eyes.
Yeah, yeah. And Brad, other thoughts?
Uh,
Any final thoughts?
yeah, I mean,
Did I go too far?
no, you went just far enough.
Perfect.
You probably could have gone farther. I just would have said, oh, he's on a roll. Just let him go. Here's the thing: is GI Joe. It's not just a toy line. I know it in every incarnation. It's gotten a little bit of stick, saying, "Oh, well, it's just a glorified cartoon, or it's just a glorified TV commercial for a toy line." It is. It started out that way, but it's a property that's survived and endured in one form or another for the last 40 years through A Real American Hero, through DIC, through GI Joe Extreme, and the Valor and the Venom, and Resolute, and Renegades, and all these different incarnations. People have been trying to keep the line alive and keep the stories going. And the result of that is, circling back to what I was saying off the top, historically speaking, the Marvel Universe was 21 years old when G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, and the comic and the toy line kicked off. And in those first 20 years, we had many, many great stories and characters kind of kick off at the same time. You had the introduction of the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk. I mean, it staggers the mind to realize how quickly all those characters and the stories that resulted, the X-Men and the Avengers and everything came about in a very short period of time, a very creative period at a time. And, with G.I. Joe, since its many incarnations, it's been about 40 years of characters and stories and comics and cartoons and video games. And there's this really, really rich history that can and should be mined. And for the most part, all the movies have really ignored everything that came before. It's like Superman ignoring Krypton, ignoring the Daily Planet. I mean, we should be, you should be putting the Pit and Springfield and the Manta and the Sky Strikers on the big screen, because that's what people want to see.
Yes.
Think of Top Gun Maverick and thinking of that only being Sky Strikers versus Rattlers over the desert or over a city, and just think of how awesome that would be. I mean, friends of mine who were much bigger Marvel Comics fans than I were, I mean, when we went to see Avengers Endgame, like they were crying when Avengers Assemble, everybody coming, because these are characters and stories and situations that an entire generation has grown up on. And if you look at the way Marvel took things when they were being a bit more successful, but stuff like stories like Civil War and the Infinity Saga, and they took the core idea that had been introduced in the comics and kind of, turned it into something that could appeal to an audience that was completely unfamiliar, and also sort of satisfy the audience that had read the comics initially and knew the stories and knew the situations. On the Marvel front and even on the DC front, I'm saying, here's Arkham Asylum, here's Batman, here's the Joker, here's the Batcave. It's stuff that you've only really known in comic books and in cartoons. To see it in full-on live action, I mean, it's a big thrill, especially if you've grown up with these characters and grown up with these stories. So I just think that there's so many great stories and situations from the original run of the comic, from the cartoons, from the various continuations, the Devil's Due series and all the other spin-offs. There's so much stuff out there that hasn't been used. And I think just to have someone just in the position to do so, to actually kind of put something forward, just say, okay, well, let's go look and see what this property has to offer, that historically has to offer, rather than just trying to come up with something completely new and slap the G.I. Joe name on it like they did with Snake Eyes.
Brad, can I ask you a question? Because you're a writer, I need your opinion on this. I have a good friend of mine that I've podcasted with before.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say his name because we have butted heads on this topic. He's a writer. He's a published writer.
Yeah.
And he will, he will fight for writers tooth and nail, and I get that. And we bumped heads when I made a comment a few years ago after, I think it was when Star Wars The Last Jedi came out, which for the record I hate. And I said that I think the Star Wars think tank needs to listen to the fans a lot more. There's always the big what could have been if we had the original main actors at least share a scene together in Force Awakens before they get pulled apart and die or whatever it is. We never, as fans, it's one of the biggest crimes in movie history, if you ask me, why we didn't get Luke, Han, and Leia to share one final together as their elder selves in Force Awakens or Last Jedi, whatever, before Carrie Fisher passed away. And I made a comment on social media saying, I really think they need to have listened to the fans in this. I don't know anyone that says, yeah, let's get a grumpy Luke to be an asshole and then choose to just die, And he pushed back saying, no, you really need to let the writers tell their stories. You really, whether or not they're universally liked or not, you need to let them do their jobs. And I said, yeah, but what if it's crappy writing? What if it's not paying tribute to the source material, which I don't think The Last Jedi was. And there's a lot of stuff out there that it does not pay tribute to the source material. And as you just brought up, what did pay great tribute to source material was Top Gun Maverick. Fantastic, done really, really well. Also, we've had a couple of good examples of paying tribute, Ghostbusters Afterlife, stuff like that. So you as a writer, when you hear that type of, you really should listen to the fans. If you as a writer, let's say you're not familiar with the material at all, which is this idiotic reason that for whatever reason they go, we don't want anyone to know about this. We want to get a fresh take on it. Let's get this writer or this author's fresh take on this idea. Let's get what they would think. I don't want them to pay attention to whatever. That's why I don't like it when people go, oh, I didn't watch the TV series to get a take on this character and that type of stuff, So as a writer yourself, I know you know G.I. Joe, but let's say someone were to ask you to write a story about something you didn't know anything about, but it had this established past. How would you approach it?
Well, I would, if I wasn't familiar with it, I would get myself familiar with it pretty quickly. I might not necessarily go onto, fan boards or message boards and stuff, because the thing with fans is, everyone's going to have a different headcanon for what they want to see. Example I would just use right off the top of my head is James Bond. I mean, there have been James Bond movies for the last 60 years. Some have been better than others, but the fact that a movie series like that has been able to go for so long, again, based on books, and that there have been spin-offs and comic books and
because they stick to
games.
The formula.
Well, the thing is, I mean, formula does not necessarily have to be a bad thing. I think if you understand the formula and if you respect the formula, you don't see the formula as a limitation. You see it as something you can embrace. James Bond in particular, you look at each era of Bond, each Bond movie series with a different Bond, they have a different feel and they have a different tone. Some are more successful than other ones, but they're all different. But the one thing they all have in common is James Bond. And even though the actor is different, even though the actors plural can be different in series, there'll be a new Moneypenny or a new Q or a new M. The certain touchstones remain the same, and that kind of tells you this is a James Bond movie, even if he does this never happened to the other fella. You have the music, obviously, but you have the car, you have the gadgets, you have the tuxedo and the martini shaken not stirred, you have the beautiful women, you have the diabolical villains. It is a formula, but if you understand the formula and you acknowledge it, that it is the type of story it is, then you learn to kind of color within those lines and not see it as a limitation. That would be the equivalent of me saying, yeah, you get to write a James Bond movie. What are you going to do? I'm going to do everything I ever wanted to do in a James Bond movie. I want ski chases and car chases. I want gadgets. I want, diabolical villains and their henchmen. I want these globe spanning adventures. And to not say, okay, well, instead of him being a suave, sophisticated British agent, he's going to be a drunk and he's living in some trashy council estate, and he's got psychological problems. And you're like, yeah, that could be the case of the writer telling the story he or she wanted to tell, but that's not really the story. You know, I mean, it's a different story. It could be an interesting story to you, but then it doesn't really become what you're trying to say. Is, well, this is a new James Bond movie. Only we don't have any gadgets. We don't have MI6. We don't have, you know, all the things that you want. Instead of him, dealing with high-powered international criminals and terrorists and enemy agents, he's breaking up a gambling ring, or he's fighting street gangs in LA or something like that. And it's, you know, to take on the mantle of a pre-existing property is a big responsibility. And I mean, you can't really see it over the shoulder. You can kind of see it on the top. It's artwork for the 4 RoboCop TV movies that I was a writer on back in the early 2000s. And in that case, it was something where I was a fan of the original movie, the sequels and the other TV series and cartoons, not so much, but being aware that there were certain rules you had to follow and there were certain expectations an audience was going to have. Now, you could argue whether we were successful in that or not. Your mileage will vary. Many people's mileage does, but you kind of take on the responsibility, and knowing that, you know, people love these stories and they love these characters, and they just want you to do right by them. They don't want you to reinvent the wheel and go completely dark and edgy and gloomy. They don't want you to kind of be dismissive and derisive of it. They want you to feel as strongly about the story that you're telling and the characters that you're telling the story of. At least take it as seriously or feel the same way as they do in it, and to be surprised. Like I'd hate to sit down and have a G.I. Joe movie tick off every box of yes they did this, yes they do this, yes they do this. I'd like to see some surprise to it, but at the same time, you know, don't make Ripcord Damon Wayans, make Stalker Damon Wayans, you know.
But there's a source material that is important to fans, and that it feels like you got to get the flavor right. You got to get the feel right. And, you know, when you do something like Snake Eyes and just go completely off on another tangent, to me, that doesn't feel like someone was doing their job as a writer. They just said, okay, he was a ninja and we need to show that background and blah, blah, blah. It's a revenge tale. You know, it just feels like someone didn't do their job there, you know?
Yeah, or they were just told not to. They were told, don't do this, don't do that. You know, they may say, don't do anything that was done in the comic. It could have been a simple case of the writers and the creative team saying, okay, we have to do this movie, but we're not allowed to use anything from the comics or the cartoons except, you know, the clan, the Ninja Clan, and these characters, and just basic what was on the back of the file cards. Like that's what you're allowed to use because that's a Hasbro thing compared to the Real American Hero comic or the Devil's Due comics, because those were written by other people. So and sometimes it's just a rights issue, you know. I mean, Ed Newmeyer and Michael Miner got credited on the stuff I worked on for RoboCop, and they didn't do anything on the show, but they got credited and they got paid for it because they created the original characters. And sometimes I think it's a matter of them kind of trying to, you know, avoid having to make payouts, or just having someone say, hey, you know, you kind of ripped that idea off of my thing that was in this book. So it's complicated. There's a lot of politics involved in movie making.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the same thing with Megaforce. I'm just saying, hey, want to do this G.I. Joe thing, and they're like, no, we're doing our own thing. Okay, well, we're going to make our own thing. It's going to be called Megaforce, and it's going to have similarities to G.I. Joe, but no one's going to look at it and say, oh, they're obviously just ripping off G.I. Joe. It was clearly their own thing, but it shared enough, I guess, common language with G.I. Joe.
Well said, brother.
Very nice. Any other thoughts, Kevin?
No, that's it. I just wanted to get Brad's thought on that because, you know, I think that when it comes to fans, we really pick apart the writing when it comes to a lot of stuff. And I can only understand the pressure too that Brad, that writers have. So I appreciate your input on that and the whole thing with the rights thing and stuff too.
So much. It's fun and it's challenging dealing with something that's based on a pre-existing property. Because obviously nobody ever sets out to make a bad movie or a bad TV show or a bad miniseries, and a lot of that's just subjective. But you know, it's like I said, it's always when you're dealing with something that's a pre-existing property, I always feel like you kind of have to step lightly. It's different if you're writing something that's completely original to you and you're just going to tell the story, you're going to make up the rules. But if you're working in a universe where there are some sort of established rules and established criteria, it's like if you are going to deviate from it, be prepared for some blowback, because we take these things seriously, and you just want to kind of see them do right by the characters and the stories that kind of captivated you and got you interested in it in the first place.
Right.
Very nice. Yes. Very well said, Brad.
Thank you. I have my moments.
And that's why I keep bringing you back on the show.
Yeah, that's why I kept around. Yeah, that's why you guys keep me around.
Everyone's why you come to these moments. So, Brad, if people want to hear more about you or hear from you, or something about you being a writer,
you may send your angry emails about my opinions on writing and properties, pre-existing intellectual properties. And my website is bradabraham.com, of course. I do most of my non-work related writing there, usually in the form of essays. I just did one on John Carpenter's They Live, and I have a special one coming up next month about the value of being bored. So you'll just have to read that and hopefully not be bored by it next month at bradabraham.com.
And Kevin, if people want to hear more from you,
you can find me on X or Instagram or Threads at Spartan_Phoenix. But please check out the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube or on your podcast catcher. And also, we have covered G.I. Joe several ways. We, of course, did the podcast recently of we called it the Remash on our Couch Potato Theater of the Megaforce movie as well. But we have talked about G.I. Joe plenty of times on there. And we have many shows underneath the Fandom Podcast Network umbrella, including Star Wars, Star Trek, Highlander, which is one I do myself, even hair metal. So make sure you check it out. The Fandom Podcast Network. Please subscribe. We would really appreciate it.
And then for me, like I say, if you're watching this, please hit the like button and subscribe button. You can also call and leave us a message at 1-559-500-3182. My shows have been on hiatus, but hopefully by the time you're hearing this, things are back on schedule. I have all my shows. I've got my Headcast, or my Head Speaks, which I look at comic books and everything geeky in general. I'm currently working on the Power of the Atom series from DC, one of my favorite characters. I have my Task Force X, where I'm looking at the Suicide Squad from the 80s and early 90s. I have the Starman Adventure Show, where I'm looking at the Will Payton Starman comic. That's coming up near an end. I've got this show, which is the G.I. Joe Real American Headcast, where we look at the G.I. Joe comic by Larry Hama and also the cartoon from the same time period. We have Bravo Team, which is a part of that, looking at anything G.I. Joe related. Every other month right now, we're doing special missions. Next month should be Special Missions 2, which in real time we've already recorded, but next month is Special Missions 2. And then the following month will be something else G.I. Joe related. And then we also still have G.I. Joe The Adventure Continues, which is the role-playing game. We're nearing the end of what we've got on that. Again, due to life, we've had to put a pause on that. So I've got a few more episodes of that to release. And then finally, the wife and I have both the Starbright Project, looking at the Quantum Leap, and then also Voyagers Cast, looking at the Voyagers TV series from 1982, which only lasted one season, unfortunately, but great shows. In fact, Voyagers coming to an end also, that show. So definitely check it out. I'm normally on headcastnetwork.com, but right now it's down due to issues. But I am on Facebook. I have my Facebook group /G.I. Joe for everything G.I. Joe related. And everything else is facebook.com/group/headcast network. For the rest of my stuff, check it out. Like I said, you can call and leave a message, and I'll play that on the air. There's a number for you guys are watching, for anyone watching this on YouTube. And again, you can check us out at YouTube. I think it's youtube.com/@G_I_Joe. Maybe have Headcast into that. I guess I should have pulled that up, but definitely check it out. And we are here normally the fourth Sunday of the month. We're recording an episode of G.I. Joe, or Real American Headcast. And then every so often I'll slip these extra Bravo Team episodes in. So definitely check it out. And thank you guys for listening in. Until next time, remember, knowing is half the battle. Yo, Joe.
Yo, Joe.
Yo, Joe.
Thank you very much, guys. And before I turn off real quick, I got this in the mail the other day.
Oh, finally got the trouble bubble.
Very nice. It comes with deep,
I got
color.
my chuckles that I had pre-ordered from Comic.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. I'm going to end the stream now. If you guys can hang